when did you know that this, like the tempo of the game or the style of the game, that's the way it was going to be through the entirety of it?
You got the feeling early on, Dan, that Patrick wasn't quite on it. He didn't have his best stuff on the first series when he missed Travis on a little zone route coming over the middle where he had found the zone void and he kind of missed him through the ball behind him. You were like, okay, he doesn't look like he's quite in sync, but there's a lot of game left to go. And then I think in the second quarter when on the back-to-back interceptions, on the pick six by Cooper DeJean, and then on the pick by Zach, that's when you knew that the pressure was really something that was bothering Patrick a lot. And Joe Thuney didn't have it. They really had a very, very, very detailed plan as far as how they wanted to rush Patrick. And it was all about outside pressure, constricting the pocket, the two interior defensive tackles, making sure you just push the pocket with power and don't give them an area to step up. And they were constricting that pocket so fast, you could clearly see that when Patrick typically would step up and find the lane to throw the football like he's done all year long, his eyes have to be down the field, and he would know where all five eligibles were. When he stepped up in this pocket, his eyes were looking at where's Jalen Carter, where's Milton Williams. I'm not really worried about who's downfield. I'm worried about trying to survive this thing. But I think those back-to-back interceptions, that's when you knew the game was over at that point right there.
Okay, but where is the genius of Andy Reid here? I know Mahomes will get a lot of blame here. They didn't do anything really different to counteract a defense that wasn't even blitzing.
Yeah, I think the problem was this. One, they didn't try to run the football against a team that wasn't really loading the box and was inviting you to run simply because they felt as though the fact that they don't blitz a lot and they were going to rush forward, that they would have 5, maybe 6 in protection, that they would be able to handle it. And they never really got off of that, despite the fact that their offensive line was showing we're not handling it. And they thought that Patrick would be the equalizer like he has been all season long, that he would be able to manage the pressure because he's so good in the pocket. But this was at a different speed. This was at a different tempo. And you know what? Sometimes even great players like Patrick Mahomes just don't have their best stuff, Dan, and he didn't have it. He just didn't. The defense hung in there. They hung in there. They hung in there. They obviously made a concerted effort to make sure Saquon didn't get going. And they said, Jalen Hurts, you're going to have to beat us. And Jalen Hurts said, perfect, I'll beat you then. And then what wound up happening is I just think the whole team got fatigued mentally and physically. It's to the point where it was like, the offense knew that we can't block these guys. And the defense was like, the offense can't move the ball. We're doing everything we can to shut down one of the best players in the league. But now we can't really rush the passer because we're in run stop mode. And it just all fed on itself.
Yeah, it's like when a pitcher doesn't have his best stuff, but he still goes out there and he's trying to fool you a little bit, trying to trick you a little bit. And then after a while, they weren't fooling anybody. The fact that, I can't even give Vic Fangio credit because he didn't do anything other than say to his guys, let's don't do anything.
Yeah. Remember when Seattle beat Denver like that? When Denver was heavily favored in the game, that was a Super Bowl that was up in New York. And you hear quarterbacks talk a lot about the fact that sometimes they get tricked into feeling as though, you know what, this game's not going to be that tough because these teams aren't very difficult. And Seattle wasn't very difficult to figure out from a schematic standpoint. But when you start playing them and you realize that it may be simplistic in terms of its structure, but the speed and the ferocity with which they play, it overwhelms you. Kansas City, for the first time since maybe Patrick Mahomes became a starter in 2018, outside of the Super Bowl in 2020 when they lost to Tampa Bay, that's the first time I've really seen that team look overwhelmed to where they looked like an inferior football team.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. And Vic, you know what? We were talking about it on TV this morning. Vic was sitting up there in that box looking down at that field going, I don't need to send anymore. I don't need to do anything. I'm just going to unleash my big dogs and let them go. And you know what? When it's like that, Dan, sometimes football is just that simple. Bigger, faster, stronger guys who are more ticked off beat guys who aren't as big and as fast as strong. And that's what happened.